Yes. All right, we're on. Thanks for joining us. It's our third roundtable of performance in code review, and we'll get right on it. First topic. So returning topic. Should we tackle Matt's points at the bottom? It's probably relevant to the rest of the meeting. So Matt, do you want to quickly verbalize your last point? I'll move it up.
Okay. Yes, I love all of the ideas and feedback in these issues. I'm getting a little worried that, like, organization, how we keep track of all of them in a good way. I want to keep the ideas coming, but I don't want to have to every week like copy it from one issue to the next one and the same topics over and over. So I don't know if anyone has ideas on a better way to organize how we collect this information.
You can voice it, Stanislav. I can write issues.
Yeah, we just can create an issue for each topic, and that should be.
Go ahead and move it from column to column until they're done. Yeah, that could be it. Anybody has other ideas? I mean, we're trying to keep it light, but I agree with Matt. Like, it's definitely something that is increasingly piling up, and rather do something now than later.
We could extend.
Yeah, issues could work.
We could extend that by maybe having a template. I think, Andre, did you say you already had a template for this? Maybe we could extend the template a bit with links to all of those issues, so that they're always in there until.
So for me, for that to be, you have to be a bot creating those issues. I would have to set up a bot to do that. Like, we have a retrospective sketching all the issues that have been delivered.
Mm-hmm.
That's a possibility if we want to take the time to write that script. The template, though. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I suppose a link to some label as a search could easily get the same list without having to edit the issue template or something too.
Yeah, I like the idea of issues, because then we can create a board for it that quickly just tells the status of it, like proposals, in flight, done, just to start off. Yeah, that could work. Anybody has other ideas or objections? We can try that for next week. I can set that up. There's another thing to this conversation that, thanks Matt for bringing it up, which is we still need a process to close them. So I did a bit of an attempt here where the returning topics have a question. Is there anything else that we need to discuss? Even if we haven't finished them, we can archive them or close the issue, so to speak, if we don't have anything else to discuss except just work on it. So yeah, we have to keep that in our minds that we need to close them. So as topics come up and we schedule them, or at least create issues for it, then the discussion goes into scheduling that issue themselves. They're identified with labels, so we can keep track of them. We don't have to spend time here on this call talking about that too. All right, thanks. I'll take care of that. Andrea will set up issues and issue board and labels. Cool. Topics to be discussed then. So we have a returning topic. It's about trimming the database, the records of the database. There's an issue already for it. There's an epic for it. Sorry. Do we have an issue already?
We should.
We do. I think so.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, let me just put it here on the agenda. I grabbed it. Issue. And nothing else to be discussed, right, Carrie? No, it's just a matter of scheduling that issue. Okay. Sweet. The next one is a returning topic from last week. Thomas wasn't on the call because it was not his time zone. So we didn't get too deep into it. So Thomas, do you want to take the opportunity to kind of like present it as a new topic and what we were thinking, so that we can probably wrap our heads around what you're trying to say?
Yes. I need to also make sure that I know what I'm trying to say. I can wing this a bit. So obviously one of the one of the worst things we do on the front end is constantly tear down or re-render DOM. And if we could do that in smaller chunks, delivered, and this kind of dovetails maybe with what Stanislav has been doing and what we've all been doing with like real-time stuff. If we can deliver it in smaller pieces to incrementally build up what we want to show, and then from that point, once it's all there, only get incremental small pieces to update that as changes come in. Like say, hey, here's a new comment. Here's one new comment that has been added to this, or hey, here's a new file that has been added, or whatever we can do with. I call them Delta. You probably have heard them referred to as operational transforms or whatever, where each piece of data is a whole document in itself and describes how to change the previous document to be the most updated data. That could really slim down not only how much network we're using and our need to like request in the back end, but also will reduce how much and how often we need to update things in the browser. There's a lot of questions here. Like for example, my second one is how feasible is this even possible for Git diffs? Because Git diffs are themselves complicated. Then computing deltas on top of that or operational transforms on top of that is even more complicated. Would this even make sense? So there's a lot of questions here, but it would be nice to be able to start doing stuff like this. Does that make sense?
Thanks.
I haven't slept for like 40 hours, so I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that did make sense. Do we do something like this anywhere in the product, Matt and Carrie? Like, do you know of anywhere where we do something like this? I mean, there's always I think there's the usual things like when you request something from the server and you like give me everything since a certain date. That would qualify as what Thomas is talking about, right? Because you would be like, just give me the new stuff. I already have the old stuff, or I don't care about the old stuff. We do have pagination, but that doesn't really count because it's just on per items. But one of the topics that this could apply to is definitely the comments. So if I'm caching the comments on the browser and I return to that page and I already have like 100 comments and I know that the last comment is a certain timestamp, I can just say to the backend, hey, can you give me every comments or updates to comments that happened after this date? Would this be possible for the backend? Like,
so that already works though. Like that's how the current, I'm pretty sure like the current node sends the last fetched at date. And then it will return all notes. Yeah, and then it will return all notes like after that date. So after the last poll request finished.
Including the effort. Oh, right. No, that's true. I forgot to put the polling, which is basically essentially one of these examples. So I guess we do have it in product. Okay.
So one thing to note, and this isn't super important because this conversation is useful no matter what. But one thing to note is like setting a time range, like after a certain date, is useful, and it, like for example, like we just noted, the notes does this, but a delta is slightly different in that it says we know you already have this data. Here are the differences between what you have and what now exists. So say someone edits their comment, you don't need to get the whole new comment. You just need to get the piece that says the comment that you already have should be edited by removing these lines and adding these lines. So like that's an operational transform where it says like there are a bunch of adds and edits and deletes to change the data that you have to look correct now. Both are useful, like the time range filtering is super useful to just like ignore data that you already have. And deltas are useful to say, we don't need to request any data that you already have. If there's a tiny little edit, we can just give you the 3 characters that have changed, those kinds of things.
Okay. Thanks, Thomas. So on a related note, Carrie, Patrick mentioned something that you and him had discussed in the past about the idea of having a cached diff on the client with a certain ID or fingerprint. that could be calculated. And then every time the client comes back to the merge request, he just sends that and hey, anything newer than this, is it still the same? Then we just don't fetch the diffs. There's an issue for that already. Created whenever possible, render the MR diffs from client side cache unless merge request ID is outdated. The ID is the fingerprint. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it's a specific implementation of what we were talking about last year around the idea of like anytime that we in the back end detect that there is a change to the data that we would be sending to the front end, just go ahead and build that data response out, even if we're doing it asynchronous, instead of waiting for a request for it. So that when the front end does get around to requesting the new comment, the new diff or whatever, we have it ready to go. It's all pre-warmed. This is slightly different in that we're pushing everything out into the client clash and specifically talking about Redis here.
Oh yeah, so what we're considering is then moving it to like a structured database on the client, like IndexedDB, which then I raised the question that some of you might have ideas, so I'm raising it here. So if we're doing this of caching the merge request in the client, and every time they come back, they check, hey, is there anything new? Now that we're comparing things with head, essentially the target branch is always moving. So it would be important to see if we can distinguish like changes on the target branch that don't cause any changes on the diff and changes that cause changes on the diff. Because if we can't distinguish that, then essentially the comparison is always going to be moving. So this is a concern for this thing. And Patrick raised a couple of questions here. Basically assessing metrics to know how frequent this would be a scenery. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Would it be a problem that the head is always moving, or we'll be able to distinguish and just, yep, the diff didn't move, the diff didn't change, even though the master of the target branch moved? Is that feasible? All right, no worries if you don't have any thoughts. Whoever picks up this issue will have to research it and try to come up with a solution for that. It sounds like an enticing possibility. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can all talk. Any more thoughts here that come to mind?
I think it kind of pertains a little bit to my understanding of what Thomas you're talking about, in that like moving the ability to actually calculate diffs into the front end in a way, right? In that if we're sending out deltas, right? If I'm sending out the delta of a commit to the front end needs to be able to basically be a Git engine on its own, right? Or am I misunderstanding?
It could, yeah. It doesn't have to though. Like the backend could still be computing the difference between one commit and the next commit, and telling the front end, this is what we have converted from the Git format for you between these two commits or whatever that you've gotten. So we don't necessarily have to implement like a Git diff parsing thing on the front end, although maybe we could.
Yeah, I just left a note, just a link of an implementation of Git using WebAssembly for no reason at all. Just that if we ever want to go down that route, we've talked about this in previous sessions. It's kind of like we're trying to do less on the front end so the front end is faster. So it seems like that would be a fairly risky, crazy idea. Sometimes crazy ideas work. So I'm not going to throw that away right away, but I will want to bring up something that Tim bring up in a previous call this week. That if there's any opportunity for WebAssembly to optimize work on the front end, we should consider it. It's there. So it might be opening up a couple of options that a couple of years wasn't possible. So this could be one of them. I don't know. Just like the link there. Cool. Any more stuff to discuss at this point? Carrie.
Oh, I just wanted to underline that I'm in no way opposed to like moving the work around to like, if we think there's a faster way, or taking a flyer, just like saying like, well, let's actually build it out and see. I just want to make sure that we're actually, we're saying, here's an identified performance bottleneck, right? So we have a metric for understanding what we're actually improving or what we're actually addressing with.
Yeah, so the only way we would be able to do this is if we already have some sort of front end caching of the data that we're getting, whether that's with an IndexedDB or something where the last time we fetched the MR, we have a bunch of diff files, and now we can just get the delta to change that MR with you know, files from what we have that have been removed, or diffs that have changed slightly and files that are still there, those kinds of things. So this would necessarily have to be a long way out. Like we can't use deltas until we have something to compare a delta against. And right now we're not doing that caching. So it's sort of a longer range out thing, which is why Andre's talking about like setting that time range is more feasible now, because we could say we have an MR at such and such date. What are the changes since then, which we could do now.
So we can table this topic of deltas for later once we advance a little bit more, and keep thinking about it as we go forward. Sounds good. Stanislav, you had a point here that we didn't cover. Do you want to bring it up?
Yeah, my point was that we still didn't solve the client rendering problem. Like we're using like a temporary solution of virtual scrolling, but it's still causing like very high total blocking times for us. And I assume this approach also requires that we do stuff on the client. So basically we re-render the diffs on the client. And I'm mostly afraid of increasing complexity and demands for like computation power of this. So this is my primary concern.
That's fair. So we have other topics to solve that rendering stuff on the client. So thanks for the heads up and the warning. Does anybody have anything to add there? Should we move on? Before I move on, should we close this topic or keep it coming back next week? My impression is that we don't, apart from the project or experimentation that we're going to have about the merge request ID, doesn't seem that we have anything more actionable here at this point. So I would suggest closing this topic and putting our efforts behind that project, that attempt. Make sense?
Yeah, I agree. There's really no prior art for this in our system, so we should come back to this when we can feasibly do it on top of other tech.
Any objections? All right, this sounds like a court. All right, I'm having too much fun here. Next, new topic, use a pure event system on the front end. Thomas, can you give us a brief glimpse?
Yeah, so this is just a gut feeling based on all the times I've seen these systems implemented. I think we lose a lot of performance to Vuex and the data flow going through Vuex and storing data in memory, and the re-render cycle when those things change. And I think a lot of the value of a Flux system like Vuex is the ability to issue the action and then have a result come out the other side. And I think that we could get a lot of performance, and this is kind of dovetails with Stanislav, your concern about like using more memory and having worse performance by adding complexity. If we could remove all that complexity of Vuex and just say, hey, we got a new piece of data, there's the event, and then when we store that maybe using browser native storage rather than like in JavaScript storage mechanism. And then when that changes, that causes a re-render. And that re-render could still be in Vue, but I think we'd lose a lot of performance there as well with the VDOM. So I'm wondering if we could replicate Vuex's event system that we're using to sort of smooth over certain trouble issues with state, and use the same type of event system to eliminate Vuex's overhead, and maybe even Vue's VDOM overhead. This is like pie in the sky kind of thing, but I think we lose a lot of performance with those things, and it'd be nice to talk about how we could have the same developer niceties without the browser overhead. I think opens this up to
suggestion.
I think that opens us up to more possible tooling that is more complex when you don't have the memory and CPU overhead of those other tools.
Yeah, I think that the risk here is that we're then be stepping away from everything else that we're working at GitLab. So it kind of like closes us into a more siloed technological domain, but it moves us away from Vue, which again, standard. Do you have any thoughts on Vue?
Basically Vue 3 has a very different mechanism of reactivity, which is causing like performance issues with Vuex. So if we complete our Vue 3 migration, it basically should reduce our memory consumption in half, and also really significantly speed up the reactivity. So I would suggest, I guess, watching for Vue 3 migration to see if it really solves the issue of like the Vuex that we have right now.
Yeah, that's right.
I love how you say Vuex. So yeah, that's a very good point. We've been talking about the Vue 3 impact of it all. So there's that. There's also, we're essentially working with Vuex right now because we're still not leveraging GraphQL. If we ever move to a GraphQL world, then we'll be in a Apollo world, which will be a different kind of problems and things. But Thomas, do you have anything else? Like, does it sound good to table this idea for now and like look out for the V3 impact? And
yeah, I think we should definitely come back to it when we get Vue 3 in, because it'll be interesting to see. And even with Apollo, it's just a different kind of overhead when you switch to Apollo instead of Vuex. So
okay. We're still leveraging the code we have right now in diffs. It's very much bound to Vuex right now, so that's a whole different context, a whole different effort, moving from Vuex to Apollo, which is a separate thread. So for now, putting a pin on it, tabling this until Vue 3. All right, closing. Next, thanks, Thomas. Syntax highlighting. I think Phil, you proposed this. Do you wanna heads up? A new overview. The tree sitter thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the source code people decided that the RubyGen to highlight is slow, which it kind of is. So they're using highlight.js. I don't think we can use highlight.js, but I'm just wondering if there's any different library or something that we could use on the back end to make the syntax highlighting faster in some way. There's the GitHub's on tree sitter. Maybe faster. I don't know.
I recently, when I saw like what was the core problem with highlighting on the backend, I think the core problem is that you basically have to highlight all the files before you can send them. And if you could just highlight them file by file on the backend and send them file by file, that should be at least a little bit better than waiting for the whole batch. So,
except we're only highlighting them one time though, right? Everything's cached and saved and whatnot.
So it's cached on the first time that the merge request is requested after a push, I'm guessing. And then we cache the highlighted file, is that it? And then we take chunk.
Yeah.
There's still that time. Yeah. So there's still that time of like on that particular time that we see expended. Would you? So, let me rephrase it. Do you think that syntax highlighting is not a problem on the back end in terms of speed, or a big problem?
That's a good question. Like, I don't have any metrics. I don't have any numbers to sort of say it is or isn't. Right. It only happens one time for each, I guess, commit or each version, each merge request diff to be compiled. That said, that kind of feeds back to what I was saying earlier. Like, every time a change comes in, like, we should just generate that. That's what's ready to go, rather than even have that first request be potentially slow. The problem that we run into that then is, like, where do you store it? Because that's a lot of data to have to be storing continually and all over the place. So maybe the complexity of splitting up the request and streaming out that data as we do it is cheaper than, there's less overhead than just buying more storage space. But I don't know. I would totally be happy to, like, put together a project where we actually benchmark a new highlighter than the one that we built in house. But we should measure it first before we throw anything overboard.
Do you know if the like when a new version comes in of an MR, does it recompute the highlighting for every file in the new version, or just the changes in that new version?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't. My gut says that we do the entire thing, because why not, right? But yeah, for an exceptionally large MR, that could be quite a bit of work.
I also wanted to add that highlighting on the backend side, it really impacts like very large blame files, or very large like file views where you have like 10,000 of lines, etc. So if that file is not pre-highlighted before we visit it, it can be really, really slow. So I guess that's part of the reason why front-end team chose to do it on a client.
Yeah, but again, the difference there is that they're rendering the whole file, and if we did that on the code review, then we would be slicing the file on the front end, which, like, we could get the raw file, highlight it on the front end, then cut the chunks that we need. That seems like a lot of overhead. So stepping a little bit back and holding on to what Kerry said, that we could have an initiative or an effort to benchmark other options and highlighting. I think all of that could be useful, but the first conversation is timing. Like, what's the impact? So if we made syntax highlighting incredibly faster, what would be the impact in the end result? Is it like 100 milliseconds? Is it 3 seconds? Because if it's only a couple of 100 milliseconds, we might have other bigger fish to fry first. Sorry for the if you don't eat fish. So we can have an issue to discuss that, and then we'll go from there. Does anybody want to create an issue to assess the timings on syntax highlighting and potentially benchmark other options?
Is that something that we can do from the front end? It sounds like I would need to be an expert in Rails for that.
Yeah, it's a back end. For now, just
we have a couple.
Issue, so.
Sorry to interrupt. We do have a couple issues open on this right now, and one of them is Patrick looking at just adding some basic timings around what we do on the back end request, because again, like, it's slow, but like, well, what's slow? I don't know. Like, what do we actually attack here? So Patrick has an issue for that. We can dig up that and link it. So I mean, you asked about pre-warming the diffs. I mean, like, that's an issue that we've talked about for like a year of doing it. And the only problem is that we are already the primary consumers of the Redis cache. And so if we start generating more and more things to cache, the Redis team will absolutely blow their top at us, right? Like, we have to just be aware of what our, how much more data we'll be making for doing that. But like, I love the idea. I really want to do it, but figure it out.
That seems to be a pattern, like pre-warming the caches that we've talked regularly in the sessions. All right, so there's an issue I linked there. It's the one that you mentioned from Patrick. Maybe we could add a comment there to add syntax highlighting for the things to be watched. All right. So for now, I think we can move all this conversation to that issue. And then if that issue then becomes an epic and then splits up into different topics, then we can do it. For now, I would say that we can close this topic of the syntax highlighting per se, and then we move to that discussion, to that issue for discussion. Sounds good? Phil? Yeah. Awesome. Complexity. Phil, you as well. So by the way, I wanted to highlight that we're at time of the previous time slot. I extended it for an hour, so we had more votes in favor than against. But if you do have to drop, it's okay. We watch the recording later. But we want to try for an hour, then we're going to get feedback on it if you liked it a whole hour or if we go back to 30 minutes, okay? It's okay. Carrying on, again, feel free to drop off. Complexity. Phil, you have the floor.
Is it me? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so yeah,
do a lot.
I think the front end's kind of doing too much now. We kind of need to take a little step back and see what the front end does. The view out's kind of got, just naturally it's grown bigger and bigger. More stuff has been added in, more features been added in, different teams have added stuff into it. So I think it's kind of nice if we just take a little step back, see what it all does, document it somehow, and see if there's any stuff that, do we actually need it? Does it actually get used? Can we remove it maybe?
Yeah, I would add that for me, one of the biggest interests here, and again, the complexity of doing too much definitely is an ongoing discussion here. In the topic of particularly documenting the system, I think there's incredible value in documenting the whole thing, the back end and the front end, so that we can then take a look at it like holistically and from high above and just see where are the places that can be optimized, where are the places that we are not very efficient. And we can, again, talking about the topic of WebAssembly, for example, we should definitely look for ways that we can optimize small pieces of small cogs of the whole system, and that could be an option. So, all right. So for now, I think we can put our efforts on documenting, creating that document of artifacts, and back end and front end, Matt. So probably we could have someone from your team. Patrick was interested on doing that the last time we talked, if I'm not mistaken, but you can check it with him later. But yeah, no other points at this point about this topic, right? I can close it. All right. Next, virtual scroller, Phil, then we have comments, recent from Stanislav. Any of you want to take this? By the way, I'm at 10% battery. I'm going to try to find a place and turn off the camera, but you guys go on and you all go on and discuss the topic. So virtual scroller, Phil.
The virtual scroller was nice to get us to hit the metrics for a quarter. There's kind of a lot of bugs that exist because of the virtual scroller, so it'd be kind of nice to remove it at some point in the future. Right now, I don't think we can with large image requests. It just kills the browser. But it'd be nice to get to that point where we could just get rid of it.
I've replied, in the thread. Basically, recently I've done a study because we have like a very high total blocking time for this page. It's actually our, I think, or the first or the second slowest page on the whole site. So we found some like easy gains that we can apply right now to improve the speed of the page, and also some difficult stuff, which is basically choosing a different strategy to render files. And I think the core problem here is, I've mentioned earlier, is using client-side rendering to render static stuff, which is basically rendering it once and doing nothing with it after that, because I don't think we ever change the contents of the files. We only had discussions. and that's it. So I've checked how our unnamed competitor does it. So what they do is they basically server-side render like 10, 50 files. So it's shown instantly, and they can show the rest to you using infinite scrolling or some kind of lazy loading. We are doing basically the same, but everything happens on the client. So we cannot start rendering this stuff before we load the whole page, load the bundle. So having some of it rendered on the server would be the fastest option. I'm not sure how we can achieve that at the moment. Probably it's not really possible. And alternatively, I'm looking into a different option, which is using rendering in a worker, which should be more efficient because we won't be storing all this data in memory once we render it. So we request the batches and then render it and forget about it. It's removed from the memory. So it will remove our memory constraints and also remove a lot of CPU usage. So in theory, it should reduce our total locking times and also help us solve the problems with virtual scrolling, which is using search on the page and anchor links issues. So hopefully that will produce us some results, but I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure if it's feasible because we have some blockers. So we will see. I'll get you updated once I finish the investigation of that.
Thank you, Stanislav. You were talking, somebody came up to my mind. You said that you then trashed the data, which is great. And then it just became like, do we ever do anything? Does anybody know something that we do with the diff-line content after render? That just became an obvious optimization.
The only thing I can think about is suggestions that would use the line from the storage from the data.
Use the diff lines?
Yeah, like I mean, when you click a suggestion, I think it gets the diff line data from the object we have on the front end.
We basically can get that data from the we can set a data property for each line and get it from there. So we can remove like the whole root app that contains all the data for all the files and all the lines. So we can reuse some data right in the DOM, and basically we can render diff files in a worker and apply the discussions all on the client, so they won't like directly interact with each other. And in order to like create discussions or show a discussion, we can reuse the data on the DOM itself with data properties.
I like it. Using the DOM as state. It's like the old days again. I love it.
It's literally like what we used to do, like the 2,000 line long notes.js file.
Yeah, but in this case, we'll be grabbing this stuff. So yeah, it's not a bad idea. Yeah. All right, so I will put this topic on that investigation that Stanislav is doing. It also seems like it's probably our best option so far that we have identified to sort out a replacement for that particular virtual store piece of software. Pending investigation from Stanislav. Stanislav, can you add a link here to the issue that you're doing the investigation on, please? Right, so we're not closing that topic. So we can keep bringing updates. So new topic then, merge request page, SPA architecture, single page application architecture by Stanislav. an issue to have the first attempt to resolve this is lazily initialize overview and changes merge request. If you want to add something, is there anything that we need to discuss here?
I just wanted to know, like, if this is by design. So the problem here is that we actually render both pages, both overview and changes page, when we go to either of these pages. So even if you don't see the diffs, they are actually being rendered in the background. Or if you don't see like merge request comments, they are still rendered and hidden with display none. I was wondering, is it by design, and can we safely like make these pages asynchronous, so we only render them once we actually change the tab? These are my main questions, because I think if it's not by design, we can easily improve our performance just by using lazy initialization of these pages.
So it used to use the on the discussions tab. The problem is then if the discussion tab had a lot of discussions and the change tab had a lot of changes, it was super slow then to change tabs. We used to, I guess it's kind of disappeared, but we used to know, we didn't use to render discussions if you're on the changes tab. But I think when we introduced paginated discussions, that kind of removed the optimization in some way. So it's kind of by design, kind of not by design at the same time.
If anything, it feels like it's a good opportunity to move that to a request auto callback, at least, like only when the browser is resting. Maybe.
Like it still depends on it, because if it's a lot of discussions and we're just gonna dump them all on the page, it's still going to be slow. Like, I mean, we should do it. Like, it should be done. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm just saying it's if there's a lot of discussions that we have to render and there's a lot of diffs we have to render, we need to figure out how to quickly change the tabs without blocking the browser.
Yeah, I'm not saying to do that only when the user clicks. I'm saying that first render the page that they want to see, or at least start working on that. And you only start working on the secondary one that's not being shown when the browsers calm down. I mean, if they do click right away, then you have to wait. But at least you give a good shot of running the first tab faster. Could be worth it.
My idea to fix that was by just using lazy initialization. So the logic will stay the same. Both pages will be rendered in the background, but the invisible page will only be rendered once you go to the tab. So once you're there, it will be in memory, and you can switch between them how much you like. So it will still be hidden using like display none, but it won't be re-rendered once you change the tab the second time.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like it's worth a try. So Stanislav, can we move on? Should we close this topic and move it to the issue? This one you're doing,
yes,
or is there anything else
issue,
besides that topic?
Yeah, the issue sounds fine. I think we should close it.
Thank you. Right, new topic. How much of Vue front end actually needs Vue overhead? I think this is Thomas. Is it?
Yes. We're skipping the changes counter because that's been fixed by Patrick. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. So this is kind of this goes back to actually something we talked about earlier in this meeting. How much can we just render and then have Vue forget about? Because we have a lot of DOM that is being like, it's reactive, but nothing changes. For example, I think the diff lines are one of them, where once it's rendered once, those things don't change, other than when you click, I want to add a comment, a comment box gets added in the diff lines. But like the diffs themselves don't change, or existing comments I don't think are updated on the fly, which would be something we could do if we were changing things incrementally. But I think we just refresh the entire list of discussions, and those are re-rendered. So I don't know that we need reactivity on those things. So I'm just kind of wondering how much are we paying in like a view tax and a VDOM tax when we just don't need that reactivity?
Yeah, I think this is also covered by Stanislav's proposal because one is circumventing the heavy payload, the heavy cost of doing it with reactive code and rendering things in a worker, putting it on a page. So I think it's kind of like addressed by that. Is it not?
It may be. We talked a little bit about, or Andre, you and I talked a little bit about this, and I heard tell of us using V-once in the past, and it maybe not working out. And I'd be interested to know maybe why didn't it work? Where did we try it? And how aggressive is the V-once directive? Like, does Vue actually like totally forget about that DOM and never look at it again? Would that save us a bunch of performance? I don't know anything about that, about what we tried to do, and whether, I mean, obviously Stanislav stuff's, it could be really groundbreaking or really application changing. But if we just slap a couple of V-onces in and we get like 15% of our performance back or 15% of memory back, that could be a huge win for maybe very little work.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when and how we used the V-once. Phil, you probably remember this in one of our crazy performance works. I think Justin worked on it. I'm not sure. I'll dig around. I'll dig up the issue and the effort we did and try to do some archaeology there. Yes, so to the point, if Stanislav initiative moves the rendering to a worker, then the V-once is moot. It's no longer an issue. So does anybody wants to add anything there, like about the questions that Thomas raised? I'll dig up the issue that we worked on.
I'll just add that there is a proposal to render Vue in Rails using create isolates, which can help with this. So we will actually render this on server and never touch it on a client. So this could be very efficient for static content, as you described. And also we could utilize Rails caching with that. So it's a double benefit. Yeah, I'll link it in the agenda. So please see what is suggested. Actually, it might be really interesting.
Yeah, particularly for Carrie and Matt on the back end, this is quite a daring proposal. But yeah, I hadn't thought of this being applicable for this problem, so I have to go back and reread it. I suggest that as homework for everybody watching this or on the call. Homework. That's been a while since I've done homework. All right, thanks for that. All right, so I'll get the issue. That's it to do for me. So I think we should keep this topic at least open for another week so we can like get to the bottom of this, whether we should revisit the V-once for more immediate gain, or if we just, what do you say? Keep it open? No objections on keeping it open?
Yeah, I think we could get some quick wins if we could figure out somewhere to use this.
All right. I can type today. Potential quick wins. All right, cool. Next topic, file batch API caching. Hey, Flori. Stanislav, this was you, right?
Yeah, I was concerned with really high response times for the dev batch JSON endpoint. So basically, locally, I get like 4 or 5 seconds for this endpoint. And this is one of our main like bottlenecks in the changes page. so we cannot render content faster than we get the data. So I was wondering if there is a way to cache a page so it responds much quicker, and what are the main blockers for that? Like, is it even like feasible at all?
We may have some applicability here with our talks about using IndexedDB to basically cache everything and a service worker to sort of interrupt requests and grab data from the index from the database. Because if you are visiting an MR that you visited already before, like of the same version, we shouldn't even need to go to the backend to get that diff. We should already have that stored, and that would most likely improve the performance of. I don't know what the frequency of visiting the same version is, but maybe 50% of page visits should be essentially instant data retrieval. But I'm not sure about that.
So I just want to add that this topic kind of came up last week with Patrick, and he did bring up the topic that we kind of recently moved some of the things that we were caching in Redis, moved it over to HTTP caching to leverage e-tags. So it seems like, and again, to not put stress on Redis and availability-wise and reliability-wise. So I feel like we are doing some caching on the client with e-tags. Is that correct, Matt and Kerry? Or at least in the ballpark? Okay.
Do we have that HTTP caching already, like in the main branch?
I think so. Yeah, it's live.
Because I think it's not working on in the development mode, because each time like I refresh the page, it's not working. Okay, so it's probably in the production environment. Different from the production. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe inspect the headers of the responses and requests of the production environment, just to see how those headers are being used. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that we can't try all the crazy ideas. So, Kerry, Matt, anyone with backend intentions, if you have any dreams about it, jot it down in your notebook next to your bed and bring it over to the next session. Sounds good? All for crazy ideas. Should we keep it open or can we close this off for now? Stanislav.
This is mainly a question for backend, because from my point of view, if we can improve it, let's improve it.
We keep it open to capture some crazy ideas. All right, we've been closing a couple of topics. I'm going to keep this one open. Sure. Dawei, I don't know if anybody in this call remembered, but we used to have a section in source code when code review was source code about crazy, not so crazy ideas, and it was exactly that sort of thing. So maybe sometimes they're not that crazy. New one. So we're getting close to the end. We have 4 minutes. Diffs metadata pagination. We have 2 topics left. Do you want to go quickly, Stanislav, so we can have time for the last one?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could split up metadata pagination, for the merge request into pages, and would it give us any performance benefits? Because we can have like 1,000 of files changed on the merge request, and we still have to wait for the metadata for these 1,000 files. I was wondering if we can get metadata like for the first 100 files to render them faster. Is it even possible? Is it performant? These are my questions.
I don't know. Is it worth investigating?
I mean, what's the, do we have a sense of the overhead? Like, is there a tipping point between batch requests versus individual requests? Like getting like one giant batch versus where you split things up?
I think that always depends on the size of those pagination of the page, where if you have an MR with 50 files, you might as well just get the whole thing in a bunch. If it's like 50,000 files, or okay, let's have 100 or no, have 1,000 files changed. You might as well just paginate for the first above the folds, so to speak, and then grab the rest. Maybe just split it in two could be an option. To start rendering. Although the fact that we're using the tree mode to render the files on the sidebar might not be exactly the same order that they come in the Diffs metadata. So that could be a like your mileage may vary situation depending on the MR. I'm willing to entertain that a little while, open an issue for research or Spike or something like that, like issue to investigate splitting metadata. And have further discussions before we schedule this, please, just so in case we don't start doing something without any potential wins. Sounds good? Open an issue, somebody? Please take that, volunteer. I'm gonna move to the last one. Kai, is this yours? Suppressing files?
It is mine. I put it there.
Go ahead.
One of the thoughts that, we've talked about this on the product side before was like suppressing things in the merge request, which then would reduce the overall payload. Like a lot of big files tend to be things that people don't actually need to review in a merge request all of the time. And so I just linked to an epic and then some existing art, a gem that could be used to maybe facilitate some of that as a way to like think about how we could gain performance benefits with sort of like a different sort of approach to this.
I know that this will depend on the project you're doing. Some projects will never see any benefits. Some projects will always see benefits, depending on the work they're doing. So I feel like this is a definite win. My only concern here is every time we attempted to cut files in the past, the community didn't like it, but those were meaningful files. These ones would be not so relevant files automatically detected, right?
Yeah, I think generally, and I think the key is like making sure the user experience allows you to like, if you want that, request it and get it loaded, right? Like a lot of our suppression historically has been
On demand.
Suppression without a way to like actually get it back, right? Like it is just gone from the diff. And so I think like that's not helpful. So being smarter about that, like not loading that data initially, but allowing users to get to it is another way to think about it.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like this is a potential. So from my understanding is basically the backend having a way to check each file, whether it's worth rendering or not, and then skipping if not. I feel like that could be beneficial. It doesn't seem like a huge effort. Okay. I could be totally wrong on this. Don't shoot me. But yeah, I feel like it's worth taking a look. So there's already issues for this, right, Kai?
Yeah, there's an epic that I linked to, and then it has issues underneath. I think one of the primary languages this comes up is in Go, and we've got some Go projects, so maybe there's a way to like test it and see.
Oh, okay. So you have to go one at a time. Exclude.
Oh,
Let's stop right here. Do we have any? Oh. I don't know. My internet is a bit choppy. Sorry. Yeah, I don't have anything about this. I mean, we should consider it. I think it's about priority, honestly. Any thoughts here? I think it's worth giving a shot. Would having a level of effort help you, Kai? Like that's missing from those issues.
I will say I put this in here because I think it's worth. I know there's a ton of ideas in here, and so from my perspective, I'm not necessarily pushing this as something we should do. I think, given that we're looking at timings and other things, I'm saying let's be open-minded and sort of look at this as well as part of that. Like maybe this is an option. So as we're looking at things, like keep it on your radar. I think that's for Carrie in the back end folks.
So okay, I'll keep it open for another week at least to capture potential thoughts on this in the next week's issue, and then we'll go from there. Thanks for bringing it up. People, we're 2 minutes over time from the extended period. I appreciate you all. Sorry for taking so long. And please answer the last point. Was this meeting useful? And I'll see you in the issue for next week. And then on a call. Thank you so much for coming. It's been great. I had a lot of fun. So thanks a lot.